Parshas Vayetzei. And as always, you don't have to follow along, but you're welcome to. And oddly enough, the Parsha begins by telling us Vayetzei Yaakov Bereshis, that Yaakov left the city of Beersheba, V'yelech Harono, and he went to Haron. Right? It's a funny way for a Parsha to begin by someone leaving. Right? You could say, that we're in Haron and we're saying, and Yaakov came to Haron. But it tells us he left. So Rashi, who comments here on the Torah, is bothered by this. He doesn't. He's wondering, why does it tell us that he left? So he says that the reason is that whenever a tzaddik leaves the city, a righteous person leaves the city, it has a mark on the city. So it wants to tell you he left the city. It's not just that he came to a city, which is a good thing for that city, but that he left the city, and the city he left has a mark. Now, the funny thing about this is that this is not the first time in the Torah that somebody left somewhere. Abraham left somewhere, right, a number of times. Yitzchak leaves places. So why does it suddenly tell us here that Yaakov left? And Rashi says here that when a tzaddik, a righteous person, leaves a city, it makes a difference to the city. So the reason is as follows, I believe. We talked about the character of Abraham. Abraham was a very outgoing person. He was probably very friendly, charismatic. He was able to change many people to go from being pagans, right, people who were totally uncivilized, to becoming ethical monotheists, right, people who believed in ethics, who believed in one God, who had an ethical way of looking at life. And he did this to an enormous number of people. So if he would leave a city, you'd know it. Right? Abraham comes to town, it's like the circus, right? I mean, everyone, you notice he's there. You can feel it. You can tell he's there. And if that's that, then if he leaves, it's logical you'd feel it, right? Now, Yitzchak was not known for his being, fun to be with. His character was much more disciplined, and many of the people that Abraham reached out to left because they were afraid of him. He was very stern, I'm sort of personalizing it, but he was much more of a serious character. He's a guy who the first thing you meet him, right? What is his life? His life is he's being offered as a sacrifice, right? He's not the kind of person who's happy-go-lucky, and so he changes things. So if he leaves the city, you notice it, right? I think the big bosses in town, he leaves the city, things change. Yaakov was known, it says, as being the one who sat in the tents, and he was complete. It says, what does it mean he sat in a tent? He learned Torah. He sat and he learned Torah all the time. He built himself up so that in the future he would be able to give back to the world. But in order to give back to the world, you first have to prepare yourself. You can't just go out and do, right? Like the story is told about two men, and both men say they're living in New York, and they go down to the Bowery where all the drunks are. And they see drunk people laying in the street. So one of them says, we've got to help these people. So that they both decide they're going to do something to help them. But they decide in different ways. One of them says, every morning at 9 in the morning, I'm going to go down to the Bowery. I'm going to find a drunk laying in the street, and I'm going to pick him up and hold him up the whole day so he doesn't lay in the street. Right? And then, at 5 o'clock, I'll go home. So, of course, at 5 o'clock, he lets him go. The guy falls down again. But the whole time he's there, he's helping this one guy for 8 hours. The other person says, I'm going to go to university, and then I'm going to go to graduate school, and I'm going to become a research scientist, and I'm going to develop a way to fight alcoholism. And then, after 15 years, then I'm going to go down to the Bowery, and I'm going to cure alcoholism. So you say the first guy, right, he goes and he helps people right away, immediately. The next day he's helping somebody, but it's not a long-term cure. It just helps the guy for the day, right? And every day he comes back and does the same thing. The other person doesn't do a thing for 15 years. Nothing happens for 15 years. It doesn't affect anybody. But suddenly he comes out with all this knowledge, and he changes the whole world because he cures alcoholism. Right? So certainly you'd think at first that the first guy is much more dedicated and much more interested. Well, the truth is the second person, right, takes the time to prepare himself, and then he can change the world. That was Yaakov. Yaakov spent many years preparing himself to go out and change the world. But while he's preparing himself, like when he's in Beersheba, at that moment, he's not making an effect on the world at all. He's preparing himself. The future will hold that he's making an effect. But right now, He's just going to university. He's not changing anybody. He's preparing himself so that when he goes out, he can. So you'd say when he left Beersheba, there wouldn't be any noticeable change because he was just preparing himself. He didn't do anything. Now he's going to Haran, and Haran, he'll do something. Right now he's ready to go and change the world. So the Torah is telling us, specifically in the case of Yaakov, that just by virtue of the fact that he's a righteous person, the presence of a righteous person in a city is a blessing for the city. Not only is it that people see him and they emulate him and they want to be like him, but the very presence of a righteous person brings blessing to the city. So therefore, if that person leaves the city, even if it appears that he's not doing anything for the city, the fact is he is. It's just not apparent. Just like the fellow who's preparing himself to go cure alcoholism, in year one, it appears that he's not doing anything. But in the end of the 15-year period, when he's gone out and cured alcoholism, then you realize that every day of those 15 years, he was making a difference. It just didn't show until the end. And so it tells us here that Yaakov left the city, and Rashi says, because whenever a righteous person leaves a city, it has an effect. And the reason that the Torah doesn't tell us this earlier with Abraham and Isaac, because with Abraham and Isaac, it was clear that it made an effect. Nobody would say it didn't make an effect. Yeah. So today, we have the same thing. People say, you have rabbis and you have guys learning. So a rabbi, hopefully the rabbi is good at what he does, he makes an effect. He's there to help people, he counsels people, he teaches people, hopefully makes a difference in the world. While other guys who go and learn Torah, and that's all they do, they learn Torah and they learn Torah and they learn Torah, and their goal is to learn Torah, you'd say, what are they doing? They're just taking care of themselves. But the truth is, it's not the case. Even those who just learn Torah are not just learning Torah. They're learning Torah, but the virtue of the fact that they're doing this in your city is a blessing for the city. And therefore, when they leave the city, it makes a mark on the city as well. Not just that it's clear if Abraham or the rabbi leaves the city, but even if the one who sits and studies leaves the city, it has an effect. So that's why it tells us this here. Now, it begins right here immediately with the second line, one of the most famous stories in the Torah, which is Jacob's dream. Mm-hmm. Right? And to put it short, Jacob, right, is on his way, and he goes by Jerusalem. And he says, how could I go by this place? And I didn't even realize it. This is the center of the world, Jerusalem. This is, right, we say that when God created the world, Jerusalem was what he created first. Like it went like, the world came from Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the center. So he says, Abraham prayed here. Abraham offered my father Isaac as a sacrifice here. My father Isaac prayed here. And now I'm walking by, I'm not going to pray here. So it says that he went to the same place, the Temple Mount, and we have the story of him falling asleep, right, and having this dream. So we're now going to talk about the dream. So, and a little bit beforehand. So it says, Vayifka b'makom, he arrived at the place. What's the place? The place is the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. The Torah does not usually refer to Jerusalem as Jerusalem. It's usually the Temple Mount and the city of Jerusalem is usually referred to as the place that I will show you. God says. He doesn't usually use the name. And here also, he gets to the place, Vayelan Sham, right? And it says in the English, right, it says he goes to the place and he spent the night. Right? Vayelan is like you go to sleep there, you go to rest there. And why? It's because the sun had set. And what does he do? It says he takes from the stones of the place and he puts them around his head and he lays down to go to sleep. So the commentators ask, why does he put the stones around his head? So on a simple level, it's to ward off small animals. Small animals, right? He's sleeping outside. Small animals could come and like bite him or come and tear his clothes. Right? And so he puts this around to guard himself. That's on a simple level. It says also that Yaakov understood that he had a role in this world. That here you have Abraham, right? And God talks to Abraham. Abraham's an amazing person. Yitzchak, the same thing. Along comes Yaakov, and Yaakov realizes he's the third in the chain of the people who are going to make a difference in the world. And he realizes that his job is that he's going to be unique to his fathers in that he's going to create the Jewish nation. Abraham had Isaac, and he had Yishmael. Yishmael went off, Isaac continued. Isaac had Esau and Yaakov. Esau went off, and Yaakov continues. Yaakov has 12 sons, all 12 of them continue. And not, it's almost like from Abraham there was sort of like, there was the purpose of why he's doing this, and there was like a waste product, somebody who was necessary but not part of the chain. And Isaac also had someone who was not part of the chain. But when it came to Yaakov, all of his offspring were perfect. All of them went on to form the Jewish nation, and it was to form the 12 tribes. And so here we understand that Yaakov understood through prophetic vision that this was going to come from him, but he wasn't positive. And therefore, it says that he made sort of a condition with God. And he says to God, I'm going to go to the place, right, to this special sort of entranceway to heaven, which is the Temple Mount, and I'm going to take 12 stones, and I'm going to place them around my head. And if I wake up in the morning, and all 12 stones become one stone, then that's your message to me, that I'm going to have 12 sons, and they're all going to be leading the Jewish nation. That's what they say, right? And if we read this in the Hebrew, it says that that he took from the stones, as vayikach ma'avnei hamakom, and the English says it also. He took from the stones of the place, but later on it says when he woke up. Let's see, it's really it goes into the next page. On verse 16, it says Jacob awoke from his sleep, and he says, "Surely Hashem is present. I didn't know," and became frightened. Right, and then it says Jacob arose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he placed around his head. You notice it's in singular now, and in Hebrew it's the same thing. But that was like in verse 18. But back where we are, he says that he put stones around his head. So here the prophecy, as the Medrash says, that Jacob says this to Hashem. So I understand what my purpose is. Right, I want you to give me a hint. So he goes to the holiest place in the world, and he says, this is the case. I'm going to put the 12 stones, and if you make them into one stone, then I realize that this is my mission in the world, and I will fulfill my mission. So he wakes up, and all of the 12 stones had formed into one stone, one large stone around his head, one almost like an arch laying on the ground, rather than 12 stones. But let's look at this, with a little bit of a critical eye. If one of us was Jacob, and we wanted God to sort of tell us that we're going to have 12 sons. He's not even married yet. He hasn't even met his wives yet. So you're going to have 12 sons. Each one is going to be a tribe, right? So all 12 are going to come from you. So I would think that what Yaakov would say is, God, I have reason to believe that all of the Jewish nation will come from me. Right? Not all the Jewish nation came from Isaac. Right? All the Jews came from Isaac, but also others came from Isaac. But from Jacob, only the Jewish people will come. I believe that this is what you want from me. He said, so I'm one person. From me will come 12 tribes. So what he would think he'd say is like this: I'm going to put one stone, and it's going to go around my head. And if I wake up in the morning and there's 12 stones instead of one, then you're telling me that from me will come 12 tribes. And those 12 tribes will be the Jewish nation. But that's not what he did. He took 12 stones, and he says, if you make it into one stone, then you're telling me that I will be the father of the Jewish nation. It's not logical. Right? In other words, you'd think that there's a hint, like God's sort of hinting to him. You're one person, you're going to have 12 sons, and those 12 will be the Jewish people. So put one stone down, symbolic of you. You wake up, there's 12, I gave you the message. But he doesn't. He goes to sleep with 12 stones, and he says, if I wake up and there's one stone, that means the message that I will have 12 sons and they will lead the Jewish people. Right? It doesn't make sense. It's backwards. So the answer to this, I believe, is that Yaakov understood that he is going to have, these offspring are going to come from him from this. But God tells us that we're going to be a mighty nation. The Jewish people will be a great and mighty nation. And to all accounts, we've been around now for thousands of years. We can now look back and see these prophecies that God said. And one thing we know for sure is we are not a great nation. We might be a great, meaning, outstanding, but great also means many. Right? There's like 1% of the world is Jewish. Right? If we've been around as long as the Chinese, we would be 30% of the world, but we're not. And even with all of the wars and all of the things that happened, we're still only 1% of the world at most. So how did we say that we're a great nation? So the answer is that the definition of who the Jewish people are is they're great, is not because there are so many of them. It is because they're united. Because the Jewish people make one thing that separates us from the rest of the world is that when we're acting in the way we should be, then the Jewish people are united. They're one nation. They're one group. They're not 12 tribes who go off and make 12 nations or even 12 parts of a nation. They are one nation. And it is a very important message. For instance, if you would go to somebody, let's say that they come from France, and let's say the family comes from France, they move to Canada, and they have children. And the children are born in Canada and raised in Canada. And they read in the paper that a French person in the United States gets arrested for smuggling drugs. So would they be embarrassed by that? No. They don't see themselves. They don't see themselves in that manner. They see themselves as Canadians, right? Canadians who came from France, and they might have a certain amount of pride of coming from France, and they might have a little bit of culture coming from France, but they don't feel that they have really a tie to the French people. That when the French people accomplish something, they're very proud, and when they do something wrong, they're all embarrassed. But if you take a Jew, and who is even a Jew who's so assimilated, and he in America, then he gets in trouble. Every one of us is embarrassed. Right? We're all embarrassed by it because we have that unity. How about a Jew who goes from, let's say, Canada, and he takes a vacation in let's say in Thailand, and he gets kidnapped, right? And they hold him a ransom, right? So we Jews feel for him, right? And we'll all go out and raise money to try to be able to free him, right? But these other people who are came from France and blah, blah, and so forth, they wouldn't do that. Now, they wouldn't do it, and it's not wrong that they wouldn't do it, right? It's not like they're bad people or they're copping out. They don't have that feeling, right? It's not there. But with the Jews, there is that feeling. Makes no difference who that Jew is. That Jew could totally betray the Jewish people, right? Have nothing to do with us, and yet we still feel for them. We still will try to help them because that's how we are. And at least in that way, we've always been united. We have a feeling of unity. And that's what God was saying to Yaakov. He says, yes, you're going to be the father of the Jewish people, and you'll have 12 sons. But your goal is that they have to be united. You have to make sure that those 12 sons do not go out and become 12 distinct, different tribes with no relationship to each other. They have to be the Jewish nation, the unified Jewish nation. And then they will be able to do their role in the world. And so therefore it was perfectly appropriate that Yaakov understood he would have 12 sons. And we know later on that in this parsha that his wives also knew that there would be 12 sons before there were 12 sons. They knew it. So, but what he didn't realize is the significance of the unity. And that's why God did it in the way he did, where he took the 12 stones and made them into one rather than the other way around. Right? Because the greatness of the Jews is the unity. Right? The number of the Jews is 12. And the other way around would only tell you the number. This tells you who we really are. So now let's look a little bit at the dream. So he goes on now, it's in verse 12. In the Hebrew or the English. I'll read the English because that way it's easier for everyone. And it says, and he dreamt. Yaakov falls asleep on the Temple Mount, and he has a dream. And behold, what does he see? A ladder was set earthward, and its top reached heaven. So he's dreaming that there's a ladder right where he is. Right? It's the feet of the ladder are on the ground, and the top of the ladder is up in heaven. And behold, angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And he sees angels of God going up the ladder and going down the ladder. And behold, Hashem was standing over him. And God is there. And he says, I am Hashem, God of Abraham, your father, and God of Isaac. The ground upon which you are lying, to you will I give it, and to your descendants. So he says to him, I'm going to give you the land of Israel, the city of Jerusalem, and the Temple Mount is yours. Your offspring shall be as the dust of the earth. Your children, as many children, you'll have children like the dust of the earth, like you can't count the dust. Right? And you shall spread out powerfully westward, eastward, northward, and southward. Jews will be all over the world, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you, and everyone in the world will consider you a blessing, and they'll say, we should be blessed like them, and by your offspring. So let's stop at that point. So first thing is he sees a ladder, right? And he sees angels going up and down the ladder. So the first problem with that is, if the angels are not humans, they're the will of God. right? That's what the Vayetzei are. When God wants something to happen, right? Let's say God wants that the grass should grow. So God thinks it, and it happens. Now, when you and I want to, let's say, put on our shoe, so we think to put on our shoe, and our hand puts on the shoe. We have to do something that our mind commands our hand to do. God doesn't have a body, so God's thoughts cause a physical action. Well, what the vehicle that God uses that takes his thoughts and makes the action, we call an angel. That's the word we use. So the will of God, right, the vehicle, like the car, so to speak, that he uses to cause his thoughts to become actions is an angel. So, for instance, the Talmud says a blade of grass does not grow in this world unless an angel pulls it up. What it means is that a blade of grass grows because God wants it to grow. When God wills it to grow, the angel pulls it up, makes it grow. Right? That's the basis of it, where it comes from. So here he sees these angels, which come from God, but they're not coming from God. It says they go up and they go down. They should be going down and going up. Right? An angel comes from up, comes down here, does his job, goes back up. But it's saying no. It's saying the angels. He sees the angels are going up, and then they're coming down. If you read it, that's what it says in the Torah. I read that to you. Right? It says, the ladder is in the earth, and its top reached to heaven, and behold, angels of God were ascending. They're going up and descending and coming down. That's backwards. They should be coming down and then going up. So there was it's like a flaw in his dream, you'd think. But the actuality is that the truth is that what God is sending him a message. He's not telling him the fact that angels go down and go up. That's understood. Any child could tell you that, in our conceptual idea, God is up. Right? God is really everywhere, but we see God as up. So, right, but the message he was sending is that an angel is the holy will of God. And there's a line in the Pirkei Avos, in the Ethics of Our Fathers, that it says, if you make your will God's will, God will make his will your will. That is to say that if your actions, your thoughts, your desires are to do what God wants in this world, which is our goal, then God will do what you want. So if you dedicate your life to following the will of God, and then somebody is ill, and you pray for that person, God will make them better. Mm-hmm. Now we're not talking black and white. I understand this is not these things have to be understood. But what it's telling us is that if you make your will God's will, then God makes his will your will. And that is to say, now your will is somebody should get better. Well, God also wants people to get better. He doesn't want to hurt people. So he'll make, but because you're asking and you've dedicated yourself to him, he will do it. But this is the idea why sometimes you'll see that a person will go to a great rabbi for help. They're in trouble financially. Somebody is sick. Somebody can't get a job. Whatever it is, right? You go to a great rabbi and you say, please pray for me. So why? Because this great rabbi is supposed to be a person who's made his will God's will. And it's like this. Let's say somebody doesn't have a job and they're suffering. So they go to this rabbi and the rabbi prays. So, so to speak, God looks down and says, I know that the person that doesn't have a job is suffering, but for whatever reason it is, they need to suffer at this point. Whatever it is, whatever purpose there is, they need to suffer. But this righteous person has no reason to suffer, and he's suffering. So I have to stop it, because he makes his will my will. I have to do what he wants, because he doesn't deserve to suffer. He's suffering because he feels the pain of the other Jew. So therefore, he stops it. Right? That's the idea. The point is that our actions bring holiness into the world. That's what we do. And in general, the way holiness is created is through our actions, through what we do. It's not a gift to us. It comes as a result of what we do. It's just like if you work out, you'll get bigger muscles, you lose weight. Right? It's a result. It's not a blessing. If you work out, this is what happens, right? If you eat healthy, you lose weight. If you save your money, you'll have money at the end of your life, right? It's just a fact. It's not a blessing. It's not a gift. It's a reality, right? The reality is that if we act properly and we do what we're supposed to do, we bring holiness into the world. So that's the message that God's sending here. Spirituality is not a gift. It's not something that I give to you. Now you're born special, and so you have it, but you're not born special, so you don't get it. And I decide I want to give my friends things, and I don't want to give my people who aren't my friends things. God doesn't have, you don't have petexia with God. You don't have like like there's a certain group that gets and a certain group doesn't get. It's all based on us as individuals. We work to something. We work to improve ourselves, right? And then by doing that, we bring holiness in the world. A simple example. You get up in the morning and you're hungry, right? Now you have to eat. So you decide I'm going to eat, but I'm going to eat the way God wants me to eat. So first thing is I'll eat kosher. Next thing is God wants me to make a blessing before I eat. So I want to make a blessing before I eat. What happens when we make a blessing on food? Imagine if you have an apple and you make a blessing on an apple and you eat the apple. So the apple is physical. It's there, right? It nourishes you. It tastes good. It looks nice. It's physical. But inside the apple on a spiritual level are called drops of holiness that are embedded in the apple. And when you make the blessing on the apple and then you eat it, so eating the apple gives you the nutrients and the taste and the smell. Making the blessing on the apple releases the drops of holiness inside of the apple, which enter you. Right? So why? Because it's kosher and you're making a blessing. So the physical apple nourishes you. The spiritual part of the apple is what nourishes your soul. When you eat something that's not kosher, it doesn't nourish your soul. You can eat unkosher and you can live a long life. It'll nourish your body. Right? The same steak that's not kosher will nourish your body just fine. But when it's kosher, it'll nourish your body and your soul. Right? It'll do both. So what you do is you're releasing this holiness into the world. So therefore, to make it short, although it can't be too short since I've been doing this for a little while, but to make it shorter, the reason the angels are going up and then down is because God's telling us holiness comes in the world from you, from us, every one of us, not from God. God can give us holiness. And that's why, for instance, if you look on every holiday, if we say a blessing in the prayer, it says, right, blessed is Hashem who created the Jewish people and the holiday of Passover. So you say, well, what does the Jewish people have to be said in the blessing before the holiday of Passover? It's Passover. We're saying a blessing thanking God for Passover. So why are we saying the Jewish people? Because God is telling us that the Jewish people are put into this world, and because we're here, there's Passover. Right? We bring the holiness into the world for Passover. But Shabbos happens to be different. Shabbos is a gift. God gives us Shabbos. Right? We didn't do anything for Shabbos. That was a gift. So if you look, a very interesting thing, when you look at our prayers, lots of prayers in Hebrew are written in alphabetic order. Aleph, Beis, Gimel, like the Ashrei. Ashrei starts with Aleph, and then a Beis, and then a Gimel, and a Dalet. Many prayers in alphabetic order. Sometimes you'll have 2 Alephs, and 2 Beis, and 2 Gimels. So, right? Once in a while, it'll be in reverse alphabetic order. It'll start with like a Z and then go back, or it starts with a Tuf and it goes backwards. What's the difference? So one of them is telling you that this prayer is dealing with the natural order of things. The natural order is the alphabet. Right? The alphabet is a natural order. A, B, C, D. That's a natural. But sometimes something is not natural. And therefore, the prayer is telling you this by telling you it's backwards. They start with the last letter and going to the first letter. So it's natural that the holiness comes into this world from our actions. It comes here and it goes up. Mm-hmm. The holiness that we do goes up. But Shabbos is a gift. We don't have anything to do with the holiness of Shabbos. That comes from God. Therefore, if you look at the silent prayer that we say for Musaf on Shabbos, it's in reverse alphabetic order. It starts with Tuf and it goes back. Because it's telling you, in this case, Shabbos is not because of you. Shabbos is from God as a gift to the Jewish people. So that's what Yaakov is learning. The angels don't come down first. The angels go up first. Because the angels who go up are from us. Right? That's the message that it's giving us. The next thing is, of all the things, why does he have to have a message that there's of a ladder? Like, of all the things, they have a dream of a ladder. It's like, what is he, a carpenter? Like, he goes to sleep and he dreams about things that carpenters dream about. Maybe if instead he was a professional bowler, he would have bowling pins in his dream. Like, well, what is the purpose that God puts a ladder in Jacob's dream? This dream is like, everyone in history, every 5-year-old kid for thousands of years is going to know that he did this, that Jacob had a dream. Go ask a 7-year-old kid in school, right, who learns the Parsha. Go ask them. They'll tell. Everyone knows about a ladder. But why a ladder of all things? All right, I mean, they didn't have escalators then, but why a ladder? So there's an important message of the ladder, which is similar, which is the purpose of a ladder it can be, to go up and to go down. Nobody sits on a ladder. Like, you don't buy a ladder and put it in your living room and say, I want to be a little bit different, so I want to have like a different kind of chair. So you buy a ladder for people to sit on. Nobody sits on a ladder. The purpose of a ladder is you're either going up or you're going down. You're not staying still. You want to have a couch, you want to put a box, you want to get a box from your washing machine and sit on it, that's fine. Sit on whatever you want. But everyone knows, no matter where you come from in the world, that the ladder is for going up and going down. It's not a place to sit still on. And that's an important message that God's giving us. God's telling us that in this world, you are either going up or you're going down. There's no resting. There's no middle ground. You can't go like this and say, I've been working on myself for 6 months to be a better person. And I've been working to make sure that I keep kosher strictly for 6 months. But I need a break. I got to take a rest. So I'm not saying you can't have vacations. There's such a thing as vacation. You need to rejuvenate yourself. But there's no real vacation from being Jewish. You can't take your yarmulke and hang it up and take a week off. Right, because the rule is you are either improving yourself or you're hurting yourself. Yeah. That's all there is in this world. Like you have, and you go on. I know I always use references to diets because my whole life it's all I've ever had. I guess I've always been overweight, up and down, and do my best. Right. So with a diet, they talk about how you want to lose 40 pounds and then you are on maintenance. Well, the fact is this maintenance is a joke because there's really no such thing. You are either losing weight or gaining weight. That's it. You can't, the only way you're going to stay the same weight is that you're eating like you want to lose weight. But as soon as you stop doing that, you're going to gain weight, period. You don't stay still. There's no such thing. And it's the same thing spiritually, the same thing in any area. Either you're using your mind to learn more or you are forgetting more. If you don't use your mind, it's like a muscle. It gets weaker, right? That's why they say when people retire, as long as they stay involved and they stay thinking and learning and doing things, right, they live longer. They're happier. Their mind is working. They're productive. As soon as they stop, right, you see it all the time. It's over, right? Nothing. They start to lose. Their mind starts to slip and they start to fade. But as long as they're still working, right, because you are either getting better or getting worse. So that's in the physical world and in the spiritual world. So God is saying a message to us. Yaakov is our father. Every one of us comes from him. And we need to know these two things. Number one, spirituality comes into the world not because you ask God for it, because you make it happen. You cause it. And therefore your angels are going to go up first. Right? Then God will reward you and send them back down. And the reason that he saw a ladder was that you have to know that nobody rests on a ladder. And the ladder is symbolic of our life. Our life is you are either going up or you are going down. Now, I'll say explicitly, that doesn't mean you can't take a break, like a rest, go on a vacation. There's nothing wrong with that, because if you don't, you get burnt out. Like I had, times where, my wife's in school and I'm working, and my schedule is such that it's hard to get away, and, things happen, and, they schedule bar mitzvahs and they don't tell me, and then boom, all my weeks are done. I can't go anywhere, right? Or they tell me and I forget, whatever it is. Then you also have my wife's schedule, right, with all of her on calls and this and that, and I can't get away. So we had a period where, like, for 8 months, I don't take off a day, because I work 7 days a week. Like it or not, it might not be called working on Shabbos, but if I don't come, it's not good, right? So you have 7 days a week. So if I saw, I like working here. For me, it's not like work. I really enjoy being with the people, these people. I don't know what I would do without all of you. Really, I really enjoy it. But I realized after doing that it affected me. I went for like 8 months without a day off, and it affected me. And I realized that I wasn't doing as well as I would do otherwise. So you take off a week. That doesn't mean that I stop growing or that I stop keeping Shabbos, or I stop keeping kosher, or I stop learning some Torah. I still do that, right? But I don't have to get up at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock. I can sleep a little late. I can wake up when I feel like waking up. And I don't have to be at appointments at a certain time. I can do what I want to do. That ability to vacate from the schedule, right, refreshes you. That's necessary. That's not what I'm referring to here. Here I'm talking about, I've been working for a year. Rabbi, I'm taking a year off. I'm taking 6 months off. I'm not going to do it. It doesn't work. Whatever you achieve, you'll lose. That's what the message is here. Right? So then he says, at the end of it, so God appears to him, and he says, I'm the God of your father and your grandfather, and I'm just like I promised them. I'm promising you, this land of Israel is yours. The Temple Mount is yours. Right? Jerusalem is yours. But here he tells them that your children will be like the dust of the earth. With Abraham, he said they'll be like the stars of the sky. Right? In another place, he says they'll be like the sands of the ocean. So you know what? I think I like those better. I like the stars of the sky. That's pretty cool. They're beautiful. You think about them. They're countless. Right? You say, oh, I'm a star. Right? That's why they use the word. Right? You see the sand. The sand is beautiful. Like, you don't think of sand as dirt, even though it is, right? And it gets all over you. But you think of it a beautiful white beach, right? But dust of the earth is dirt, right? What's God telling him? Your children will be as countless as the dust of the earth. All right, you can't count the stars. You can't count the sand. You can't count the earth. So why pick the earth? I mean, like, are we that bad? You compare us to dirt, right? I don't know if that's necessarily a nice thing, but it actually is. There are many interpretations of this, but one of them that I saw, which might not be pretty in its way it's done, but is real, which is we spend all of our time above the earth, above the dirt. We walk on the dirt, but ultimately in the end, we're under the dirt. In the end, the dirt's on top. Right? That's what happens. The dirt will never be gone. The dust of the earth will always be here, and it'll always survive, and it's always in this world. And what God's saying is, you're going to have your ups and your downs. The Jewish people are going to have tough times, and they're going to have wonderful times. But in the end, you will survive. In the end, you'll still be here. And you have to look at it. We have to realize that the amazing cultures that ran the world, like today, who runs the world? Maybe not today, but 20 years ago, you'd say the United States ran the world. They're the most powerful nation. The whole world's economy is based on them. Whatever the President of the United States says, the whole world listens, right? They were like really powerful. But you know what? Rome was the same thing. Rome conquered the entire world. And anywhere people knew that existed, they conquered it. Greece conquered it. The Babylon, right? The Babylonians, they conquered it. The Persians, they conquered it, right? And they're all gone. But here, the Romans come in, they attack the Jews, and they destroy the temple. Where are they? They're not around anymore. We're still here, right? The Nazis, they came in. They're not here. We're still here. The Persians, they're gone. Babylonians, they're gone. We're still here. And we're not even 1% of the world. And yet we're still around. So the point is God is telling us, just like dirt in the end is going to be above everything else, so the Jewish people in the end are going to continue, and they're going to, in the end, show the world that they're above everything else. I don't mean that we're arrogant, we're great, better than them. That's not what it means. It means our role, our job, is to bring the world to be a better place. And that we'll be able to do. We'll accomplish that. That's one of the reasons why he uses dirt. And so every time when God compares us to something, there's a different reason. It's not that he's saying we're like dirt. But there is something special, unique about dirt that is like the Jewish people. There's something unique about stars that's like the Jewish people. There's something unique about sand that's like the Jewish people. Right? Like sand, the water keeps hitting the sand. Right? If you have a house, for instance, and you're on the beach, it's not going to be long before the beach is going to catch up to your house. That erodes. Your house ends up like in the water after a while. I don't mean in our lifetime, but it takes time. But you live on the edge. After a while, it erodes, right? But the sand never erodes. It's still there. It's always there. Like the dirt might erode, what's behind it does, but the sand always is there. That doesn't erode. So that's a message as well. See, all of these things have unique messages to us. That's one of them. Another one of the messages about the dirt is that dirt is low, right? Like I said. And there are times in history when the Jewish people will be at the lowest point in history. Like they'll be chased around the world and be attacked and destroyed and looked at like we're nothing, right? And people will really, like they'll say, where's your God now, you guys? Look at you and look at us, right? So it says it's not a coincidence that it says in the sentence, you will be like the dust of the earth and you shall spread out powerfully westward, eastward, northward, and southward. And it's to say that even when you are at the lowest point, you know that from the lowest point you will become powerful and spread out around the world, and you will become an eternal nation. That is to say, like we say that the darkest is before the dawn. Right? Right? It's the same idea. That there are times when the Jewish people will be flying high, and there's times when we're really low. And people will say, I don't even want to be Jewish anymore. I'm going to give it up. I don't want this. I should bring children in the world. They should be chased around by non-Jews and tortured. I don't want this. So God's saying that even in times like that, you have to know that it's through that darkness, that depths that you go, that you will be brought up, and you will go throughout the whole world, and you will always be here, and they won't beat you. That's what he says there.
Would you say that the Holocaust was one of the most darkest times that the Jews have been through?
Certainly. If you read the history of the destruction of the Second Temple, it's comparable. The difference was the technology, right? Yeah. But there were millions of people killed.
Oh yeah.
It says when they talk about the destruction of the Second Temple, there's an expression that the blood went down the streets like water. Now you think that's poetic? It's like a poet, right? But if you've been to Jerusalem, you know that the streets there today are like they were then, and the streets are built like this. Right? Like that, because when the water goes down the street, they put these ridges in the center of the street so that the water goes into there and it travels down. Right? If there's a lot of water, it'll overflow it, but usually it'll travel down so you can still walk on the street. It's like a natural sewer system above ground to get rid of water. So it says that the blood was so much blood that it went down the streets like that, like rain would. Now, like I said, you think that's a poet. It's not a poet. It's the history books say this. Like Josephus, who was a Jew who became a Roman, who was not friendly to the Jews, describes what he saw. He was there, and he saw that the blood of the Jews was going down the streets so much that it was like rain. It was like running down the streets to the lowest point. So it was a horrible time then too, but certainly we don't diminish the Holocaust as being an extraordinarily horrible time of enormous proportions. So here it just goes on a bit more, and so Jacob wakes up and he realizes where he is and what he's doing, and on he goes, and then we continue on, and he's going to go now. And he wants to meet. He's going to go to Lavan. But before you get there, there's one thing that's interesting. And Jacob's now he's about to meet his wives, right, and meet the family. But if we look on 147 on the bottom, just chapter 29, verse 1, it says Jacob lifts his feet and went towards the land of the eastern. So he wakes up in the morning. He gets up and off he goes. He looks and behold, there's a well. Right, so he's out walking and he sees a well. Right, it's like the desert, so wells are very good. He sees a well. And behold, there's sheep all around the well, right? So because people are bringing their sheep there so they can give water to their sheep. They're in the desert, right? Their shepherds are taking care of their animals, not Jacob, other people. He's seeing that, right? So he says that when all the flocks would come, somebody would roll the stone from the well, and everyone would water the sheep. And then they put the stone back on the well, right? In other words, somebody owned the well, and you just couldn't go there. You had to go at a certain time, and the person had rules, maybe even charged for the water, whatever, but they did it. So you imagine what you have here is you have a bunch of shepherds, and they're just sitting around. They're not doing anything. You have all the sheep there, and these guys are just like sitting back, smoking cigarettes, and having a nice time, right, on somebody else's nickel. They're working. They're supposed to be working for somebody, for their owners, and they're not working. They're just taking it easy, right? Just hanging out, waiting for the well to be opened. When in reality, they should be walking with the sheep, and they have a job to do, exercising the sheep, making sure the sheep have food, and then when it's time for the well to open, they open. It's just like, right? So what does he do? So Jacob sees them, and he says, "My brothers, where are you from?" And he says, "We're from Haran." And he asks them, "Do you know Lavan?" Right? And they said, "Is it well with him?" "It's well." And he goes on, and he says, "Look, the day is still long. It's not yet time to bring the livestock in. Water the flock and go on grazing." Right? He says to these men, What are you doing? Right? He doesn't know them. What are you doing? You're sitting around just taking it easy. It's not time for the water. Right? It's too early. Go graze your sheep. Come back, have some water, and then take them out again. What are you doing here? So he says that to them, and they respond to him normally and tell him about Lavan and Rachel, his wife. Right? That's how he finds out about them. So let's update this to today. Imagine I'm walking down the street and I see a bunch of construction workers. Right? They're whistling at the women and they're standing around doing nothing. And they're not building the building. But let's say city workers, so at least I should care about it. They're city workers. They're standing around, just fooling around and not building the building they're supposed to be building. So I say, hey guys, what's going on? You know, I pay my taxes. What are you here hanging around here? 10 guys doing nothing. The day's still long. Go back to work. It's not time to quit. So what do you think they'd say to me? What they say to me, I don't want to say, right? They certainly wouldn't be friendly, right? But that's not what happens with Yaakov. Yaakov's a stranger. He shows up. He sees these guys hanging around doing nothing. So he says, hey, what's with you guys? It's the middle of the day. Go back to work. When it's time, the sun starts to set. Come back. They'll take the stone off the well, and you'll give water to your animals. You don't come. It's not like you take the animals, go to the well, and wait for the day to end. Go to work. Go walk with them. Graze with them. Take care of the sheep. Don't do this. So they say, okay. And they're nice to him and friendly and everything. So why is that? Why does he get it? It's not like these people were more civilized than people today. And the answer comes from the opening line in verse 4. Jacob says to them, my brothers, where are you from? He calls them his brothers. And that's the important point. In other words, he doesn't just say, hey, what's with you guys? He shows them that he has a sincere concern for them. He's interested in them. He's like them. I'm not superior to you. I'm not your boss. I'm not a taxpayer who's upset because you're wasting my money. I care about you. You want a job? You don't want to lose your job. You're going to have a problem. Your boss is going to find out you're not working. You're going to lose your job. You're supposed to take care of the animals. The animals are suffering. You're not doing it. You're just, I care for you guys, right? So when a person shows an interest and a sincere appreciation for other people, the people respond. Right? And I see this all the time. There's a mitzvah in the Torah that says that if you see someone doing something that's wrong, you're supposed to reprimand them. You can't say it's not my business. You're supposed to say something. However, you see a guy smoking. You walk up to a guy in the street and say, you shouldn't smoke. They'll get cancer. So what do you think that guy's going to say? He's going to say, oh, you're the first person to tell me. I really appreciate it. I'm going to stop right now. Of course he's not going to say that. He's going to punch you in the nose. They're going to ignore you. If he looks at pictures of these lungs on the cigarette packs nowadays, and that doesn't stop him, you're going over to him and saying, you should stop smoking. It ain't going to do no good, except for make him upset with you, right? Because he doesn't realize, and you're not expressing that you care about him. That's why you're doing this. You're not doing it because you quit smoking and you want to show how superior you are to him, which is what happens. You're doing it because you care about this person. Well, why do you care about him? You don't know why. You just do, right? But he doesn't understand that because of how you spoke. But when we have the idea of reprimanding someone, I tell people all the time, you can only fulfill the mitzvah of reprimanding someone if you know that person's name, and you know their spouse's name, and you know their kids' names. In other words, you have to know them. You have to have a relationship with them. They need to know that you care about them. Otherwise, you're excused from the mitzvah of giving them a reprimand, because they won't listen. Right? This is goal-oriented. Your goal is to help them be better, not to show them that they're stupid. If you go over to somebody and tell them, are you crazy? Stop smoking. What's wrong with you? Are you stupid? Right? They're not going to listen to you. They'll punch you in the nose, and you have to be an idiot to think they listen to you. Yeah. But if you have a relationship with someone and you call them and you say, "Come on, let's go out to lunch," I care about you. I respect you, and we get along. I said, and I know that if I'm going to tell you something harsh, that it could cost me my friendship, but I care enough about you that I'm prepared to lose it. You have to quit smoking. It's going to kill you. Please. Now that person might not listen, but there's a much better chance that they'll listen, because they know that you're doing it with your heart, because you do care, not because they're another notch on your belt, another on your gun, like another little mark to show you did some good deed. You do it because you care. That's what Yaakov's doing here. Yaakov says, my brothers. These aren't his brothers. They're a bunch of pagans. Right? Yaakov is a Superman. He's an extraordinary human being. Yeah, he's way above everybody else, but yet he doesn't act that way. He doesn't treat anyone that way. You're my brothers. Brothers care for each other. Right? So that's why he speaks in that way. That's why they respond to him, because they feel it. That's what we have to be the same way. Right? We have really the same idea. So now, we're going to have to miss a lot, I'm sorry to say, because I spent too much time in the beginning, as we usually do. And today I have to leave on time. So we get on like 150 and 151 when he meets Lavan, and he starts to meet Rachel, his wife Rachel. And here on 151, he goes to him and he says, Yaakov goes to Lavan and says, I see your daughter Rachel. She's my soulmate. I want to marry her. So Lavan says, fine, but you know what? You have to pay for it. You have to have a dowry. You got to pay me. So I want 7 years. Right? You work for me for 7 years. So he works for 7 years for her. And then, of course, I'm going to make the story a bit short because I want to just get this point across, is that he tricks them, right? He has the wedding, and you think Rachel and Leah probably looked alike. They were similar, right? Not perfect. You see from the description they weren't exactly alike, but under modest clothes and under a veil, probably they had a similar stature. Maybe they had a similar shape. Maybe a similar voice. So he tricks them. He gives him the other sister that he didn't want, right? And so he goes to him and says, listen, you tricked me. I want my wife, right? I want Rachel. So he says, well, you want Rachel? Listen, our custom is the older daughter gets married before the younger one. That's it. You married the older one. And that wasn't the deal, right? He tricked them. So he says, you want Rachel, you got to work 7 more years. Right? Because you work 7, you got Leah, you want 7 more. So why does he agree? He said, forget it. I worked for Rachel, you give me Leah, it's a 2-for-1 deal. You want to give me Leah, I'll take her, but I want Rachel. Right? Why doesn't he do that? And it's only right. Right? He worked for 7 years, but he takes the next 7 years, no problem. I'll do 7 years of my life. Right? The first 7 were a loss. The second 7 I'll do. Right? Why does he do that? So the answer is as follows. When you go to a store, you buy potato chips, and they have a 2-for-1 sale. Right? You buy, so you get one like barbecue and one regular. So you think the regular one, that was the free one, is embarrassed because you only took it because it was free? No, it's potato chips. That's embarrassed. Doesn't have feelings. But human beings have feelings. You imagine Leah finding out that my husband took me as a 2-for-1. I wasn't worth working for. He went and he my father, and my father tricked him, and he says to my father, well, she's not worth anything. I want Rachel. You want me to take Leah? Fine, I'll take her, but I want Rachel too. I'm not working another 7 years. I didn't work for this one. Right? Imagine the rest of her life. That's how she feels. Right? Now they tell a story about a guy who was like an anthropologist studying cultures, right, different societies. And he goes off to an island because he hears on this island that men could buy their wives from their father-in-laws for 3 cows. Every man could buy his wife. You have a really special woman, 3 cows. That's what it costs. Sometimes only 2 cows, but in general it's 3 cows. Right? But here is that the king of the island paid 50 cows for this one woman. 50 cows, that's like 10 women. Right? He paid 50 cows for this woman. So he says, I have to go there and understand this culture and find out what was so special about this one woman that he's willing to pay 50 cows for her, right, instead of 3. So he goes and he meets the king and he tells him, I've come all the way here to study your culture and to find out why you did this, that the queen should be 50 cows. Right? You could have gotten the queen for 3. Right? Why you did do that? What's so special about her? So he's watching and he sees she comes in and she serves them and she sits at the table and she converses and she's really intelligent and they have very good conversations and she's pretty and she's very regal. Everything you'd want, she has it. But still, 50 cows, that's a whole city of women. Right? That's not one woman. He still doesn't understand. So he says to the king when she leaves, he says, listen, tell me the truth. What's so special about her? What does this woman do that's worth 50 cows? Yeah, she's smart, and she's pretty, and she's sophisticated, and she knows how, etiquette, and she's great as a queen. But there's a million women who you could train them to be a queen. Why her? So he says, you dummy, she's not worth 50 cows. I paid 50 cows for her so she should feel that she's worth 50 cows, because she should feel that in my eyes she's worth 50 cows. Man, that's what made her the woman she is, because she believes that in my eyes she's worth 50 cows. She is now worth 50 cows. She's going to be the most sophisticated, regal woman in the history of this island because I did that. And it was true. And she became worth 50 cows. He didn't trick her. She now believes this about herself. I'm that much better than every other woman. That's why he picked me. In my husband's eyes, I'm worth that much. I'm going to be worth that much. That's who I'm going to be. Right? That's what Yaakov did. Yaakov goes and she says, I worked 7 years for Rachel, and you gave me Leah. Well, I want Rachel. Right? And you just throw in Leah. He's not going to do that to her. She'll be destroyed. So he says, it's worth 7 years of my life to work for free, so that I can get Rachel, and I can save Leah's dignity. That Leah should feel good about herself, right? And that's why he did it, and that's what's so important. And it's and the whole message is right that it is very important. In fact, the Talmud has an interesting statement, and we'll have to stop with that. And the message in the Talmud is, it says that how a husband is supposed to treat a wife, and a wife should treat a husband. So it says a husband should treat his wife like a queen. It says, a husband should treat his wife better than he treats himself. That's what it says. And a wife should treat a husband like a king. Now, so that means that if the wife treats the husband like a king, so the husband will be like a king, and he'll treat his wife well. Now, but there's a problem. I'll make up a story. A woman comes to me and she says, the Talmud says we should treat my husband like a king. My husband's not a king. He's a wonderful man. He's a kind man, but he's a schlep. He doesn't dress nicely. He's not sophisticated. He's not a genius. I love him, but he's not a king. How am I supposed to treat him like a king? So I would say to her, right, treat him like a king, and he'll be a king. You treat him with dignity, he'll act with dignity. You treat him as he's intelligent, he will become intelligent. You treat him with all of these, positive traits, he will be that way. Just like the king who paid 50 cows for the woman, she was that way because she knew, my husband thinks I'm worth 50 cows, I am worth 50 cows, and I'm going to show it in every way. She had that self-respect and the dignity. So too does the husband, and so does Leah. And that message is extremely important. That when we are dealing with people, we have to be concerned about their self-respect, about how they feel about themselves. Yaakov gave up 7 years of his life. Right? Okay, he lived longer than we did, but still, 7 years of his life for one reason, so that Leah should not feel that she wasn't worth what her sisters were. And that was so important to him that we have to hear that message. Mm-hmm. He gave up 7 years of his life for us to know that today. Mm-hmm. So that's how we have to act. We have to be reminded when we have our children, they're all different. They all have different strengths and weaknesses. We have our spouses, we have our friends. We treat them with respect, and they'll act with respect. If you treat them without it, they'll act without it. It's all based on how we treat them. And that's the message there.